Hey everybody, this is James and Alex here, and we are a couple of the admins on the Facebook group page. Today we're going to be talking about motors. That is our topic. And let's see, how do I see where people are in the room?
Can you switch to what's the view? Gallery view? Because online I see you.
I see share.
On the Zoom. You can't always see who's there, but they'll have to say.
Okay, if anybody's here, say hi, and if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comment box. I think there's 2 people here. Bear with me, haven't run a live myself before, so I can't see who's in here. Alex, where do I see? I'm blind, I can't see who's here.
Well, that's okay. It's good if you zoom to gallery view in top right corner, so people can see both of us in the live, and then we can, on our Facebook, we can see how many people are here, and then when they do say hi to us, then we see who it is. So we'll have to be patient.
Okay, is this gallery view?
I can't see it yet online, but online is always a couple moments behind.
Oh, okay.
If you see 2 people on your screen next to each other on Zoom, then that's most likely gallery view. We're doing it, people. I still only see you in the Facebook group live.
Yeah, I only see me too.
Top right corner, there's a little button. Did you see that? Where it says view in your Zoom?
Yeah, and I click gallery view. It's either gallery view or speaker view.
Yeah. Maybe go back to speaker and back to gallery one time, and then it might switch.
Okay, that's speaker view. I have Inception here because there is a lag on the phone. It's either gallery view or speaker view.
Well, how about you just get started either way, because now we have 4 beautiful people here already, and maybe your Zoom just doesn't want to do it.
All right, well, we'll get started, and we'll just have audio for Alex then. So thanks for people who are attending. So I'm a 1-3 emotional authority projector, and I'm an energy projector. And then Alex, she's also a 1-3, and she's self-projected. And so she's going to be speaking about the different on and off functions of the motors, and how having motors defined or undefined are different. So that would be, just to give a quick overview of what an energy projector is a projector with at least 1 motor defined. And there's 4 motors in the chart. I'm going to show here's mine. I do everything by hand because I'm old school like that, but it's these 4 right here. So it's the root center, the sacral center, the will or heart center, and then the solar plexus. So I've got 3 of those defined. So if you just had 1 of those, you would be an energy projector. Is that right? Or do you have to have all of them defined?
An energy projector is anyone who has a motor defined, as far as I know.
Anyone defined, yeah. So those are the 4 motors of the chart. The other 5 centers on the chart, you could call them awareness centers, or they mainly have projected channels. So it's a different quality of an awareness because it's the splenic center, so it's intuition, or it's the G or identity center, or the head or ajna. So this has a different quality or feeling than an actual mechanized motor, like the sacral energy, which is just pure vital workforce energy, or root center, which is adrenaline or life pressure, or the solar plexus. So emotions are like this, have this powerful wave of mechanism to them. And then the kind of the backup that we were just talking about, Alex and I, is the sacral is kind of the main motor, you would say. This is the main workforce energy. And then this will or heart center, it's kind of like the backup. It's a backup energy source. And at that point, you're just kind of going on pure willpower. Any questions on the 4 motors before I move on?
For me?
I think this is more immediate when it's live. It's different than when I do my actual readings because that's one-on-one in the moment. So if there's any, I'll see as they come up. Next topic I'm going to move to, after kind of defining what the 4 motors are, is the importance of the connection to the throat. This is something you hear talked a lot about in human design, of these 4 motors and which way they're getting connected to the throat. So I hate to break it to you, but since we're all projectors in this group, no one in here technically has, by definition, one of their motors hooked up to their throat. So you could have, like in Alex's case, she has her G or identity center connected directly to her throat, but that's an awareness center, so it's not a motor. Or you might have the your splenic center connected to the throat, but that wouldn't be called a motor to the throat. And one of the reasons that you might say projectors do really well in groups or benefit from a sounding board is because of the connection that other people's charts or others' designs can allow the energy from the other 4 motors to be connected to the throat. So personally, I do find this to be true, that in my own kind of self-contained, self-referral existence, I'm not super vocal, like I could go a long time without talking to anybody, but when I'm around people that give me that energy connection to the throat, then I can talk because I feel like it allows me to get a lot of my emotions or how I'm feeling or whatever. I can just get it out, you know? So you would need to have either a manifesting generator or a manifestor design to have in their single chart a connection to the throat. For example, I have a 2-year-old son, and he's a manifesting generator, so his direct connection is from his solar plexus to his throat. He's 2 years old, so he's not talking a whole lot, but I imagine he's going to be speaking with that quality of how he feels. So that's before I pass it on, that's the last thing I'm going to mention is, depending on, it's kind of nuanced, but depending on which center or which motor specifically is connected to the throat, it can change the quality of how that person speaks, of what they're speaking about. And you can kind of tune into this, of how they preface things and how they're talking. And you can kind of clue into, well, where is it coming from? Like, where are they speaking from? And so if it's from the sacral center connection, it's going to be people who talk about work a lot. So if you talk to a lot of generators, it's like talking about their work. It's like the working capacity. And then similar to that, the root center, because it's directly connected to the sacral center, is more about doing. So it's someone to say, like, I do this, I do that. It's about action and activity. So those are the 2 kind of working action channels of speech. And then naturally, if it's motor connected to the emotional solar plexus, that person's going to be talking about how they feel. I don't have a motor to the throat because I'm a projector, but I'm emotionally defined. So that's usually my mode of speaking, that when I do talk to people, I usually want to talk about my feelings and how I feel. And then what's the last one?
Will center.
Will center. That is, what's the voice for that? Oh, it's me, 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 me. And people talking about themselves all the time because it's directly connected and linked intimately to the identity center. Those people talking about themselves a lot. Maybe not in an arrogant sense, but they're just talking about me. Versus what Alex may be able to speak more to about, of the G or the identity center to the throat. That's more about I am what I talk about. That's the theme for that. So do you want to talk about a self-projected experience?
Yeah, and I know you guys probably can't see me still, but so you're gonna see James's face while I speak.
I'll try to troubleshoot it like that.
Huh?
I'll try to troubleshoot it here.
Yeah, because Zoom is doing a thing. But yeah, what I've experienced from people that are in my life, I have a lot of defined will, and James has defined will, but it's not talking about the self from the ego if the will is connected to the throat, or which we projectors don't have. But it's about talking about what we need physically in this life as resources, as physical objects, and knowing also with the channels that connect from the will center, they're oftentimes about money and about resources and stuff like that. So it's very much about what we want to have in the physical experience here, what we need for our physical experience, and that kind of stuff. As opposed to and for projectors, it doesn't connect to the throat, but it can give you different qualities of that will center and what it means to have it defined and connected to some other kind of center. And for me, for the G center to the throat, and I know we have a bunch of self-projecteds in here too, which it always means G or identity center to the throat. It's very much speaking from the heart, speaking from our soul, speaking from our truest, deepest identity. And it can be very, very sensitive to us, what we say. And that's why there's a lot of deconditioning necessary, because we can get easily triggered. Or when a child speaks with a self-projected or G to the throat, and my partner too, he has two centers, two channels from the G to the throat, plus mine. So between us, we have 3 from the G to the throat. So what we say to each other can oftentimes be taken in a very sensitive way. So it's all about deconditioning and learning and still keeping the heart open and still daring to speak up. But the G is not a motor. So we're not talking about that too in depth, but we just wanted to point out the difference of what it means here to have different things connected to the throat. But also we really wanted to bring this to you today because so many projectors feel like if they don't have a motor, they can't have energy. And that's one thing that we really wanted to get by today and help you understand on a deeper level about the motors. Was there anything else that you wanted to go in detail into with those motors, or do you want me to start going into those cycles? Are you frustrated with tech right now?
Yeah. Yeah, a little bit. Did you talk about the difference between energy and non-energy projectors?
Well, I'm a non-energy projector because I don't have any motor defined, right? All my emotional solar plexus is undefined. My will center is completely open. My root is completely open. And my sacral, of course, is undefined because I'm a projector. So I'm definitely not an energy projector, but I have tons of energy. And part of that comes from my Aries, I guess, in my astrology. I have, a lot of initiation energy in me. And that's, I guess, why I also resonate so much with manifestors. But it's also when I had a lot of physical trouble and gut health issues, I didn't have a lot of energy. So it's always important, no matter what design we are, but especially when we don't have a motor, it's important to decondition our limiting beliefs, our conditioning, our fears, our deep wounds, our traumas, whatever that means for you, right? But it's also, no matter what type we are, we need to take good care of our physical bodies because they are our awareness vehicle in this life. And it's not just about we need to be healthy so we can live long or anything, but it's like when we take good care of our bodies, we can have all the energies we want, right? And we are going to talk about this more later, because James and I discussed just beforehand about. Jerry?
I didn't interrupt you, but do you know where the button is to share both screens?
No.
Okay, never mind.
But we talked about some singers, and you know how, for example, some singers or some big rock stars, they don't have any motors either, but they use them in the way that they can amplify the energy that's around them. And so this is a lot of what this is about, but it's only possible if we take good care of our bodies, because through our bodies we experience life, and if we want to use our intuition more as well, we need to be able to distinguish between what's a fear and what's an intuition. And that is, so those things, deconditioning and taking good care of our bodies, healing whatever needs to be healed, sleeping a lot, drinking good water, having a healthy nutrient-dense diet, spending time in nature, movement, all that kind of stuff is incredibly important for that. So in that regards, it doesn't really make a difference if you are an energy projector or not. But what makes a difference is how you listen to your body, how you treat your body, and how you listen to your motors too, if you have one defined, right? Because James can tell you from experience too what it's like to have motors defined and still not having like unlimited. Nobody has unlimited access to energy, right? Do you want to go a little into that?
Yeah, having things defined gets a good rap sometimes, where it's not necessarily, there's nothing good or bad, I always say, in human design, because there's always a flip side to it. Because if you have a completely defined throat and access to energy and everything is just, you know, screaming energy in your chart, not necessarily a good thing, because that is also like can be kind of intense for people, because it's all this excess energy that they have to get rid of. It's pent up for them. They have a hard time to relax, and it's hard for them to wind down. So with like a classic projector, without that, you're able to be kind of more even keel. Sometimes you don't have like a lot of excess energy per se, you know. And then the next kind of category above from that would be an energy projector. So there is a capacity to have slightly more consistent energy, you could say. My experience with it being an energy projector, I mean, we're all just kind of speaking in the dark in a way, because it's so subjective. We only truly know our own experience and what our own design is like. Other people can tell us what it's like. So not knowing what it's like not to be an energy projector, the way I have kind of investigated into this compared to what people talk about, I feel like I have relatively consistent physical energy, even though I definitely lack consistent work energy, or more specifically, like mental energy. So I can be like burned out from the day, and I have worked and kind of pushed myself as much as I can, or I have like no mental energy, but I could go run a marathon if I needed to, like just off of pure physical energy. So that's kind of how I see the motors, as almost like physical mechanized machines. So I'm a machine sometimes. That's how I see it. But I think it does like give me more of it. Maybe it's like a pseudo generator, you could say, like an energy projector, because I do feel like there's sometimes where I have to work out to kind of discharge some physical energy before I can rest and go to sleep, and it's kind of annoying. And did you mention Freddie Mercury?
Not yet. I thought we wanted to speak to them more about what it means to not have a throat connection with a motor and don't have.
Because there's misunderstandings a lot of times that you have to have a throat connection with a motor, or that you have to have a defined throat. So I have an undefined throat. So that you would think that somebody who had undefined throat isn't necessarily going to be like a loud, booming voice. But Alex and I were just talking about singers that have undefined throats, and she knows quite a few. And go ahead.
Oh, yeah. well, Freddie Mercury is a projector, a mental projector with only the head and the ajna defined. Everything else in his chart is undefined. Obviously not some gate, but all the other centers. So and the thing about the chart is that we always need to remember we all have all of the chart. It's just, do we have a consistent, reliable access to it or not, right? And just because I don't have the will center, for example, doesn't mean I don't have willpower. I'm just meant to become wise about willpower in exchange, in experiences with the outside world. James has to figure out his willpower and how to use it within himself. Not as much with the outside world. It's his own inner experience. Right. And the same, for undefined throat centers, right? And Freddie Mercury being a great example because no motor to the throat, no motor even showing up in his chart as defined, but he has access to them. So his throat center, his voice, has a lot more range. There might not be, and you can hear that in all of his songs, the sounds he can make, it's just incredible. And the openness that he has and how he dared to step, I don't know if you've seen the Queen documentary, but how he's chosen to step through his fears and the bullying, and like he had like this funny mouth shape that everyone was mocking him for, and they were all like, you think you can sing? And then he opened his mouth, and through all the bullying, through all the fear, he stepped through. And that is a lot of what deconditioning is too. It's just like, okay, we're afraid of something, but stepping through it, right? And so, and then being a celebrity, and I talked about, where did I talk about that yesterday? Oh, in my free workshop, we talked about Michael Jackson, who's also a projector, and who has done a bunch of questionable things, aside from being an incredible talent and gift to the world. In that regard, we were talking about how hard it is to do all your deconditioning and healing as a celebrity in front of the whole world, right? And so, but when we do that, when they do that, what happens is, and that's, I believe, why you see so many celebrities and musicians leaving the world at like 28, because it's freaking hard, right? Mm-hmm. But when you step through that, and then you see what Freddie Mercury can do, he amplifies an entire, not anymore sadly, but he amplified entire stadiums through his open centers. He was able to process and hold and amplify so much energy and then gift his voice on top of that, right? And Mick Jagger too, he has a defined throat, but he has no motor to the throat. He is very similar design to me. G center to the throat, 1333, only the G and the throat defined. But then also when we come to other like artists, for example, Lady Gaga has an incredible wide range of voice. She's a generator, so also no motor to the throat. So it's just like realizing that whatever we don't have defined, we still have access to. It's just we have to become wise about it, and we have access to it conditionally, let's say. It's not always available inside of us.
That's a really good phrase or analogy about the full vocal spectrum and openness specifically, like where you're open. And this is like always really good to emphasize to projectors about where you're open is where you could become wise. It's because that's where you have the greatest capacity to take in that the full range of outer experience, like you explained it. So it's almost like if it's open or undefined, you're seemingly vulnerable and able to be deeply conditioned. Like that's kind of the negative way of looking at it. Where, like you say, when you kind of meet those things and you step through it, then you step into the wisdom of the open centers. So and then the capacity to have a greater intensity of energy than somebody who has it defined.
Yes.
Freddie Mercury being the perfect example, because I don't think you could find too many people who would argue with you that he has like, especially for a man, maybe other than like an opera singer like Pavarotti or something, which I'm not well versed in, but just his ability to run the gauntlet of the vocal spectrum is pretty amazing.
Yeah. Makes me want to listen to Queen now after this call.
Yes.
And do you want to talk about, should we talk about now, like how to listen to the motors if you do have them defined and they're on and off cycles? Or do you want to jump into something else first?
No, you mentioned the on-off specifically, and I think I know what you're talking about, but I'll chime in when it jogs my memory for what you're speaking about. Because I think of I know the root specifically is talked about in terms of being on or off. Mm-hmm. But the other centers, yeah, let's go into it.
Yeah, like you said, and the root is all about, like, a lot about doing as well. And it's the cycle there is the adrenaline that it pushes to the sacral, right? And and I know a bunch of manifesting generators too, who should have, quote unquote, should have all the energy. And if they have the root defined, they experience this too. It's like it's either on or it's off, and depending on if the root is sending adrenaline to the sacral or not. And so when the adrenaline push is on, then you can experience big things, of big rushes of energy, so to say. And I can have that too when my adrenaline is off. Like I said, I don't not have the root because I don't have it defined, right? But it's just not a consistent pattern that I can look for. And then when it, like James said, the sacral being like the main motor, and we don't have it defined obviously as a projector, but that also means like it has the biggest energy that it can give people for working and for getting things done in that sustainable way, but also only long term if they really enjoy what they're doing, or else the sacral can get burned out. So, but the sacral can go all day long, and at the end of the day, it's like, okay, now done my work for the day, I've gotten all my energy out. And especially if you have generator type children, make sure, and I'm experiencing that with my Mani-Gen son so much too, he hasn't had enough physical exercise, he doesn't fall asleep, he's unhappy, he's discontent, and all the things. So that just needs to be, it's like a big bucket that is available full of energy for them, for the generators, but it also needs to be emptied every day, or else it gets moldy inside or whatever. But this is not of concern for us projectors, of course, because none of us have it defined. But then there are the projectors that have the emotional solar plexus defined, like our lovely James here, and the will center defined. And we also can have obviously the root defined. My daughter has that too. But yeah, the emotional solar plexus, and James can speak to those more with your own experience. You can speak to those more, but the emotional solar plexus is an emotional motor, which is, with the highs and the lows of the emotional wave that comes with it. And I see that in my emotional generator partner a lot as well. And even though he has the root and the sacral and the emotional solar plexus, and he has a lot of energy, but still, when he is on his emotional wave at the more of the top area or the higher frequency, I don't want to call it frequency because it's not like bad or good. It's just.
Is this what you're calling the on-off cycle? Like when you're high on the emotional wave, are you saying that's on? Like you're on emotion?
It's not as much necessarily an on and off button. It's more, I feel like with emotional solar plexus, it's more like a faster, slower cycle. It's like he gets more animated, more extrovert, more chatty, more enthusiastic, more into everything.
It's more like a dimmer knob.
Yeah, and when the emotional wave is on the low, then it's more like turn inward, read a lot, consume more, don't talk as much, not being as animated or enthusiastic about things and stuff. Do you experience that too?
Yes, I'm relating very much to what you said. So if anybody is emotionally defined, or you have to cope with an emotionally defined person in your life, because there is kind of it's really symbiotic in a way, like the undefined emotional person versus defined emotional person. But from the outside perspective, from somebody who doesn't really experience this um, kind of seemingly bipolarness of just really being like super happy and alive versus like it looks like it's down or out to other people, I think, but it's not necessarily. It's just it's a different frequency. But I can imagine from the outside, it seems that way.
Yeah, makes sense. And then the last one being the will center. And I think that is more of an on and off because you can push that for a while, right? And like James said earlier, the will center is really meant as a backup energy if you really have to push through something. But, and it's a fairly more rare center to have defined. What is it, like 8% of the population, says Karen or something?
I think it's
But
8 to 12, something like that.
yeah, but still, the people who have it, and if you're not aware of having it, it can be, it can become one of your more like go-to energies. And if you do that, then it'll be like diving deep into exhaustion long term, right? And James saying like it's a thing, it's a backup energy that I use if I really just need to push through something. That's really how it's meant. But also a lot of people who do have it defined, they do notice that they need more naps, even if they're generator types. How do you experience the will center in that way with naps and stuff?
Well, I'm kind of integrating what you're talking, the term you're using of on or off. So it does make sense to me about these three centers being kind of on or off switches. And this is I'll never figure it out my whole life. Maybe at the end of my life, I'll go, oh, that's how it works. But they are kind of like these switches, and some of them are on, sometimes some of them are off. But the sacral and the root, these do seem to be more like the oomph to get things done, which the projector life for sure. It's kind of like inconsistent is almost the same as unpredictable. So it's like it's unpredictable whether it's going to be on or off for me. I usually don't know on any given day. Sometimes I'll wake up and I'll go, I guess it's on right now. And then, so those three, sacral, root, and then will center, yeah, it does seem like at times they're on and sometimes they're off. And I kind of just go with it. Like I ebb and flow with, if I feel on that day, then I kind of schedule my day to be more active. If they're off that day, then I kind of take it easy. So that does relate to my experience. And then you add in the dimmer switch of, but how are my emotions feeling this day? Then most times I don't think about it, to be honest. So just for actual purposes of speaking about it is when I give it more thought. Because if I thought about it all the time, which it's snowing right now.
Wow.
Anyways, I don't know why it's snowing in almost May, but yeah, it's just something. So it's something to be aware of. And I forget the question, but yeah, what you said relates to what I was saying. Yeah.
It was about the emotional solar plexus and how it's more of a dimmer switch.
That one seems more predictable for some reason.
Yeah, there's the emotional wave can be tracked, right? That should be fairly consistent for everyone with emotional definition, how it, happens. Is it like a 3-day cycle, a 5-day cycle? Is it a 2-week cycle? Depending on which channels they are and depending on who you are, right?
Yep.
People can track that, and that's a good exercise for everyone who is emotionally defined to find out, how long does it actually take my wave to go through a full cycle? Because that's your authority, and then you know how long you need for a decision, on average.
Yeah, I should track that more often. But yeah, there's three mechanical types of emotional waves, right?
How do you mean mechanical?
Well, the actual sine graph of how the wave works, because there's 3 different categories of waves.
Oh, that's what you mean. Yes.
So, which helps actually predict what your wave is going to be. So then your motions are technically always going, because when I think about motorized systems, I think of like a spin. And so all the motors are kind of spinning internally. And this also, it's also like the chakra, the Hindu chakra system and chakras are talking about the chakra spin. So these are the ones that spin pretty consistently. So the emotional center is definitely spinning all the time. So there's an underlying function of spinning, but it can spin like fast and you're high on the wave, or you spin low. And then there's also the velocity of how it's wavering. And it gets, there's like, I forget the names of them now, but there's like the one that's just kind of like constantly oscillating like this. It's not necessarily extreme highs or extreme lows. So it's kind of like this pattern. And then you've got, what's the other one? I'm trying to think. I know mine because it's like the big crescendo of like going up a roller coaster slowly, and then you get to the top. So it's like this peak experience of you're just high on the wave completely. And rather than kind of going like this and it's a slow descent down, it's more like a crash.
Yeah.
So that one is actually kind of predictable in that I know when I'm at like a 10 out of 10 of happiness, I kind of like reserved in a way because I can predict that's like this isn't going to last forever.
Tomorrow is going to be different.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like the next day. It's like the rug just gets pulled from underneath me, and it's really. I've learned to work with it more, but that's kind of how it is.
Yeah, the third one being the high highs and the low lows.
Yeah.
And that can often seem to people who are not familiar with what it is, of being almost feeling like bipolar or manic or something like that. So
yeah.
That's also good to know. You know, there's nothing to fix. It's just the emotional wave, right? And it is meant to be creative.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. We're kind of hitting home on the emotional center here, but it is a creative energy too.
Yeah.
So that's kind of its power is creative force. So even in the lows of emotions, it's like there's a lot of really deep, profound creativity that can come out of more of an introspective. Introspective is, as you put it, might be a better way to look at it rather than like down. Because I don't feel down, I just feel less emotional, which people perceive me most of the time as kind of, I don't like the term emotional person because that gets, a negative connotation, but like emoting, I guess.
Emoting.
Like actually emoting. But then if you're not emoting and you're just kind of introspective, people will ask you what's wrong with you. They're like, what's wrong? Well, lots of stuff, but nothing in particular, So yeah.
People are asking, how are things going for you? And you're like, in general, good. But also, if you want to know more, I wouldn't know where to start.
That's usually where I land, yeah. So yeah, just it's a good time to foster creativity on those introspective lower times.
Yeah, and when your will center is pausing, it's a good time to take a nap.
It's always a good time for a nap.
I don't really like naps, so that's interesting. But I know you like doing nothing sometimes and taking a nap, so everyone's different.
Yeah, I don't even need to lack energy to take a nap. Sometimes I take a nap specifically when I have a lot of energy because then they're like more lucid naps where I'm like more present for the nap. Or I use it. I mean, on the idea of creativity, it's like I'm just resting or I'm laying down, but it's not that I'm not working. This is kind of the heart of, I feel like, the projector's ability to work. It's not like going to a job or something, but it's the ability to kind of see. There's a deep seeing that projectors have, which doesn't look like you're doing much for the most part. Like if you just went to your job and you sat down and you're like, I'm just deeply seeing into the future of the company, you wouldn't necessarily get promoted for that. So it's these long periods of like creativity and visualizing and seeing. And in Karen Curry's languaging, this new term for the projector of an orchestrator, I think is really apt because it's the ability to kind of wait and see what's going on and put together the pieces of the puzzle and kind of orchestrate the whole picture. So I take advantage of rest to technically work. So I work the most when I'm resting.
I totally hear you. When I go to bed at night or in the morning, like this morning, for example, I wake up oftentimes naturally between 5 and 6. And then I just lie there and I feel like that's working because I integrate, I have things plop through for me from life, from the universe, from consciousness or whatever. And when I meditate, like I get my to-do list, not that I actively think about it. It's like, okay, this is really important today. And my priority to-do list. So it's like I work well, as soon as I get up, just through awareness and through being. And resting can really help with that because when our bodies are confused or when we have a lot of energy and we have a lot of interaction with other people and then we hold or we have and carry all that energy in our bodies, then we can't do so much of that projecting, right? Because there's things in our body that need to be released. So lying down for that reason is a great way to work for projectors because we release these different energies that we carry around from experiences and from our day, and then we can be clear.
You ever feel as though the being around other people, you gain energy from it, but it's almost like they spin up your motors?
Well, nowadays in person, because of COVID, I'm not as much used to it anymore, so it can get a little much at times, and I like to keep it to smaller groups or one-on-one. But for example, yesterday I wanted to get some things done in the garden, and my generator man just sat in the garden with me. He didn't even need to do anything, but I had plenty of energy. So in this way, I do use it in that way, and it can be quite nice.
That's kind of what I meant. It's like the other people help kind of spin up your motors.
Yeah.
But if it's too many people, too much, and not quite the right energy, it's like the circuits can kind of get crossed, and you're like, I need to slow all this down. It's not necessarily bad. It's just it's too much.
Exactly. short circuiting or whatever.
Yeah. That's
all right, people. Do you feel like I have a call in a few minutes, so I wanted to see if there's anything else that needs to be said here.
Well, it does seem like it's just been me on video the whole time, and a few people have been sticking around. So thanks for everyone for sticking around. And let's see, Liz confirmed that they could hear you, which I thought would be funny if the whole recording was just me with long pauses in the middle talking about you and you're not there.
No, I mean, this is still incredibly valuable, and I hope you guys take a lot from it. And if you have any questions or follow-up or comments, please comment below and let us know. We're happy to answer whatever we know. And
there's I think Liz is still here and Jessica's here. Hi, Jessica, and maybe one other person. So if there are any questions, then we can take a few minutes to answer those if you have a minute, Alex. Or for anybody who's watching the recording, you can feel free to put some questions in the comments, and then Alex and I and other admins will we're usually pretty good. I'm okay at it, but going through the questions and asking them, answering them afterwards.
Yeah. But it looks like we were pretty comprehensive. Liz says, thank you. Joanna is here. We're just about to finish, Joanna, so it's a good replay, though, because I know you have a similar setup to mine, too, so hopefully this is helpful for all kinds of projectors, motor and not energy or not energy projector.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll just recap with the 4 motors, and I think it's more common to not have the motors defined for projectors, but if you have 1 or more motors, that would put you more into the classification of an energy projector. And as we mentioned here, it doesn't really matter technically whether you have something open or defined, but being aware of it, aware of what's going on in general, is kind of the key thing to remember.
Exactly. That's beautiful.
All right. And then also, I don't know if we have a theme or topic for our next live. So if anybody wants to comment on things that they would like to see us talk about, then you can add that in the comments as well. So we'll probably do another live here one of these days. So a topic that you guys would like to hear about. But Alex, unless you have anything else to share, we'll sign off for the day.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Thanks for doing this together, James. We'll see you guys soon.
See ya. Have a good week.
Yes. Bye.
Bye-bye.